For years, the movies have been selling us the same image of the Nordic warrior. He's always a huge guy, covered in a layer of old dirt, caked on blood and wood soot. He growls loudly, drinks ale from an unwashed horn, and smells like a wet dog. It sounds incredibly brutal, looks great on screen, and is absolute historical nonsense. Real Scandinavian warriors would look upon these Hollywood characters with undisguised contempt. The harsh truth is that these brutal raiders were among the cleanest people of their era. While enlightened Christian Europe considered hot water dangerous to one's health, the Norse regularly scrubbed themselves until they shone. This seems like a completely illogical and strange paradox. Why would rugged men, living amid war and the cold sea, be so obsessive about keeping their fingernails clean? But for an 8th century person, proper hygiene was literally a matter of survival. Today, we view washing as a tedious daily routine before work. During the era of Scandinavian expansion, cleansing the body was a profound social event. People would gather together, discuss the news, wash away their fatigue, and plan new raids. It was a kind of social network, only with wooden tubs instead of smartphone screens. It sounds strange, but it was precisely these small details that fostered discipline within their society. In this episode, we'll break down the anatomy of Nordic hygiene down to the smallest details. We'll take a look inside their homes, examine their tools, and read the shocked accounts of their contemporaries. You'll learn how ancient chemistry served as a substitute for modern shampoos and conditioners. Get ready to forget everything you've seen in expensive historical TV series. Reality was much more complex, much more ingenious, and smelled completely different. In those days, people held entirely different views on the connection between body and spirit. Dirt on the skin wasn't just a sign of uncleanliness. It was believed to attract disease and evil spirits. Modern scientists have only recently proven the link between physical cleanliness and psychological resilience in extreme conditions. The Vikings understood this complex concept over 1,000 years ago without any scientific laboratories. They turned ordinary washing into a strict weekly ritual that was not to be broken. It served as a psychological reset after arduous sea voyages. For the Scandinavians, water has always held a profound sacred meaning. It washed away not only physical dirt, but also negative energy after bloody battles or arduous journeys. Northern priests sincerely believed that a clean warrior was far more pleasing to the gods than one covered in dust. Therefore, bathing was often accompanied by the recitation of special protective incantations for good luck. Cleanliness became an integral part of basic warrior discipline for them. Without it, it was unthinkable to imagine a true legendary hero from the ancient sagas. Imagine a man who has spent 3 weeks in an open drakkar under an icy rain. His clothes are thoroughly saturated with corrosive sea salt, sweat, and thick smoke from campfires. The wooden ships offered no protection from the elements, forcing the crew to sleep right on the wet planks. The first thing he did upon returning to his native shore was to wash the war off himself. In modern armies, returning to base also begins with a hot shower and a clean uniform. The only difference is that instead of shower stalls, the Norse used wooden tubs and hot stones. Interestingly, archaeologists constantly find more than just deadly weapons in Scandinavian burial sites. Next to the legendary forged swords of Ulfbert lie neatly arranged tweezers, ear spoons, and razors. These items were crafted from high-quality, expensive bronze or even silver by the most skilled artisans. Why would a warrior setting off for Valhalla to fight an eternal battle take a pair of eyebrow tweezers with him? Because he had to appear before the stern gods in perfect condition, free of excess hair and dirt. For the Vikings, these small, elegant tools were just as important as a heavy battle axe. Their European neighbors viewed these strange customs with great suspicion and outright incomprehension. English chronicles are full of angry, envious accounts of how these barbarians seduced local women. And do you know what their main secret weapon was in matters of love? They simply bathed every week and regularly changed their underwear made of thin, soft linen. To an English monk of that time, this looked like dishonest magic and a vile, devilish deception. The British bathed only a couple of times a year, so they were completely outmatched. But don't think that the life of a northern warrior consisted solely of pleasant spa treatments. This remarkable cleanliness coexisted with habits that would simply make a modern, pampered person sick to their stomach. Their methods of protection against the biting cold and wind on the open sea were extremely radical. Sometimes the best protective face cream turned out to be a thick layer of smelly animal fat. Walrus or seal fat repelled icy water perfectly and guaranteed protection against terrible frostbite. It was a world of wild, paradoxical contrasts where brutality and aesthetics blended harmoniously. To understand the logic of these people, one must completely set aside all modern stereotypes of domestic comfort. In their perilous world, perfect order on the ship guaranteed survival in any severe storm. And just as surely, perfect order on one's own body reliably protected against the festering of wounds after battle. Medicine back then consisted of forest moss, plantain, and a faint hope for the mercy of the great Odin. Therefore, washing away dangerous bacteria before they killed you was the most sensible life strategy. Proper disease prevention proved far more effective than any bitter herbal decoctions. In modern English, the word Saturday derives from the name of the ancient Roman god Saturn. But in the Scandinavian languages, this day of rest is still called by a word derived from the Old Norse logadagar. Literally, this translates as day of hot water or long-awaited washing day. This is not just a curious linguistic coincidence, but direct historical evidence of their strict schedule. An entire great civilization had an officially designated day off devoted exclusively to hygiene. No urgent household chores could override this beneficial sacred tradition. Imagine the high level of organization in a society where bathing was firmly embedded in the calendar itself. This meant that every Saturday, in thousands of settlements across Scandinavia, people would begin heating water in unison. Women carried heavy firewood from the forest, while men stoked huge blazing fires and heated stones. Then, these sizzling stones were thrown into massive wooden barrels of water to bring it to a rapid boil. A modern electric water heater does this in a couple of minutes, but back then, the process took a good half day. The entire close-knit village would come together for one important common goal: collective purification. To the devoutly Christian Europe of that time, such meticulous regularity seemed simply wild. The Church strictly taught that excessive attention to one's body inevitably leads to sinful thoughts and transgressions. Many revered saints took sincere pride in not changing their coarse clothing for years, considering this a great spiritual feat. The Vikings, on the other hand, viewed a person who smelled bad as a lazy and utterly unreliable failure. In their view, if you couldn't maintain basic personal hygiene, you wouldn't be able to hold your ground in battle. And from the perspective of simple, ironclad logic of survival, they were absolutely right. An English priest named John of Wallingford left us a wonderful historical document detailing his complaints about the invaders. He wrote indignantly that the insolent Danes had the disgusting habit of combing their hair every single day. Not only that, but they bathed every Saturday and constantly changed their beautiful, warm woolen clothes. According to his angry words, it was through these underhanded tricks that they insidiously undermined the virtue of honest, married women. They even easily persuaded the daughters of noble, wealthy lords to become their lawful wives or faithful concubines. It sounds like an amusing historical anecdote, but for the offended Britons, it was a true national tragedy. Let's look at this situation from the perspective of an ordinary, sensible medieval British woman. On the one hand, she has a local peasant lad who smells strongly of manure and then of garlic. On the other hand, a tall, stately foreigner arrives on the shore in a clean shirt, smelling pleasantly of soap. The choice becomes quite obvious, even without considering their impressive physical fitness and plundered wealth. Hygiene became an incredibly powerful tool of soft power for the Vikings in the foreign territories they conquered. They defeated local men not only with sharp swords, but also with their impeccable appearance. The washing process itself wasn't a quick 5-minute morning shower before work. It was a long, thorough ritual that included a hot steam bath, very similar to a modern Finnish sauna. People would sit for a long time in the stuffy room, sweating profusely, and then delight in whipping themselves with fresh birch branches. This was excellent for getting stagnant blood flowing and deeply cleansing the pores after hard physical labor in the cold. Modern professional athletes use saunas to quickly recover sore muscles after strenuous workouts. The Vikings did exactly the same thing after swinging a heavy battle axe for several grueling hours. Clean, fresh water was a very valuable resource, especially during the harsh, dark winter months. Constantly melting loose snow or chopping through thick ice on a frozen river was a physically grueling process. Therefore, the entire large family would often bathe together in a single large oak tub, strictly following a set order. Bathing always began with the family's primary breadwinner, respected elders, or the most honored guests in the house. To us, this may not sound very hygienic, but back then, it was a completely standard and universally respected social protocol. Moreover, a strong antiseptic lye was generously added to the water, which quickly killed most dangerous germs. I wonder how they practically addressed the issue of hygiene during long and very dangerous sea voyages. On a cramped, open drakkar, there simply wasn't the physical space to build a large fire and heat a lot of water. There, the rugged, bearded warriors wiped themselves down with damp rags and used salty seawater to disinfect minor scrapes. Sea salt was excellent at drying out inflamed skin and prevented dangerous fungal infections from spreading rapidly on their feet. It was an ancient and highly effective alternative to modern wet wipes for travelers in harsh, extreme conditions. Even in rough seas, they did their utmost to maintain a minimum level of cleanliness on their muscular bodies. It is important to understand that cleanliness was not merely a luxury or a whim, but a vital part of their religious worldview. In Norse mythology, even the all-powerful gods regularly bathed and took meticulous care of themselves. The beautiful goddess Frigg, for example, had a special, secret, picturesque spring for her mandatory daily bath. Ordinary people simply imitated the behavior of their supreme celestial patrons in order to be just a little closer to their perfection. If even the mighty thunderer Thor finds time to wash, then a simple, humble farmer certainly shouldn't be lazy. Thus, Laugardalr was a true, unshakable institution of bodily purity in the harsh northern world. It reliably saved them from the massive, devastating epidemics that regularly decimated the densely populated, filthy southern cities. While in Paris and London the poor were dying by the hundreds from appalling, unsanitary conditions, in Scandinavia, people were peacefully steaming in hot baths. This beneficial weekly ritual became the solid foundation of their incredible physical endurance and heroic health. And it was precisely this habit that enabled them to successfully colonize half the known world. If you think the Vikings washed themselves with just water, you're greatly underestimating their intelligence. These people were excellent practical chemists, even though they didn't know Mendeleev's periodic table. They invented their own unique soap, which was strikingly different from modern mild cosmetic alternatives. It was a very harsh mixture of animal fat and wood ash that produced an incredibly strong alkaline reaction. Today, such a concentrated product would be sold exclusively in the industrial chemicals section for unclogging pipes. But Northerners applied this caustic paste directly to their skin and hair with enviable regularity. Why would anyone use such an incredibly caustic mixture for a simple, everyday morning wash? The answer lies in the primary domestic problem faced by every medieval person, from a simple, poor peasant to a wealthy, influential king. The name of this widespread, tragic problem is pesky parasites, more specifically, common body lice and nimble fleas. It was precisely these tiny, blood-sucking insects that carried the most terrifying and deadly infectious diseases of that dark, unenlightened era. The Vikings' harsh alkaline soap literally and very quickly dissolved the sturdy chitinous exoskeletons of these extremely unpleasant guests. It was a harsh treatment for human skin, but an incredibly effective method for thoroughly disinfecting the entire body and long, thick hair. This ancient, aggressive household chemical had one very interesting side effect, and a highly noticeable visual one at that. The constant use of strong, concentrated lye slowly but surely bleached the natural dark pigment from people's hair. As a result of regular and thorough hair washing, the hair and beards of the rugged Vikings took on a distinctly light shade, and this was considered incredibly fashionable and truly beautiful in their closed and very warlike ancient society. Light, shiny hair was strongly associated with sunlight and a direct divine blessing from the higher powers. Blondes were held in such high regard in the Scandinavian world that dark-haired men deliberately used much more concentrated lye. They literally bleached their thick black beards mercilessly in order to fully conform to the generally accepted Nordic standard of male beauty. Sometimes, in order to achieve the perfect light shade, vain warriors would leave the caustic, soapy lather on their heads for several long hours. This required tremendous iron will, as the active ingredient mercilessly stung and burned the delicate scalp. However, the end result was worth the suffering, since a flawless appearance directly influenced the respect of comrades in the Drugina. Modern professional hairdressers use hydrogen peroxide to safely lighten hair in comfortable, upscale beauty salons. The Vikings achieved exactly the same stunning visual result using ordinary gray ash from a campfire and old lard. The procedure was far from a pleasant, relaxing spa treatment and very often caused severe redness and skin irritation. But the sincere, passionate desire to look like a true noble son of the North outweighed any temporary physical discomfort. After all, these tough men endured painful, deep blows from a heavy sword in brutal combat without a single moan. So the slight stinging sensation from homemade soap seemed like mere trifles to them compared to serious battle wounds. The production of such wonderful and essential soap was a complex craft in its own right and usually fell on the fragile shoulders of women. First, one had to go deep into the forest and gather the right kind of ash, preferably from certain deciduous tree species. Birch or strong oak ash was best suited for this important purpose due to its high content of the necessary active ingredients. Then, the collected sifted ash was boiled for a lot in water to produce a caustic, concentrated lye, which was carefully strained through a thick linen cloth. This routine yet dangerous process took quite a long time and required a great deal of practical experience from the mistress of a large household. To this boiling, hot, strained solution, they very carefully added high-quality mutton, fresh seal, or pork fat. The resulting bubbling mass had to be stirred continuously for a very long time with a long wooden stick over low heat until it thickened completely. The result was a very slippery, not particularly pleasant-smelling jelly-like mass of a murky gray or dirty brown color. Sometimes they would deliberately toss in dry, fragrant forest herbs to at least somewhat mask the sharp, unpleasant smell of melted animal fat. Despite its rather unappealing appearance, this primitive cosmetic product simply did an impeccable job of removing any dirt, even the most stubborn. Interestingly, they used this powerful alkaline mixture quite actively and successfully, not only for daily personal hygiene. This same strong homemade soap was also excellent for thoroughly washing their heavy woolen and everyday linen garments. Dirty, sweaty clothes were soaked for a long time in huge, wide wooden vats filled with hot water and a caustic, foamy solution. Then, the heavy, wet fabric was mercilessly and rhythmically beaten with special smooth wooden sticks on flat stones near a fast-flowing river. This vigorous mechanical action was excellent for beating deep, ingrained dirt out of the very dense weave of sturdy threads. Homemade, potent lye easily dissolved in grained salty sweat, dried dark blood, and old grease just as effectively as modern laundry detergent with active enzymes. Your smart modern washing machine does exactly the same thing, only using much more complex built-in electronics. The Vikings, however, achieved perfectly sparkling clean fabric solely through brute muscle power and basic empirical knowledge of chemistry. Clean, wrung-out clothes were carefully laid out to dry right on the green grass under the open sun and a cool breeze. This gave the clean garments a unique, subtle scent of freshness that so greatly annoyed their perpetually unwashed European neighbors. But let's return to hair and its widespread fashionable bleaching, for there lies another extremely important practical aspect. The lye not only radically changed the color of one's hair, but also made it incredibly stiff, like strong, thick copper wire. This remarkable chemical property made it easy to braid very intricate plaits and long beards before a military campaign. Such incredibly stiff and durable structures held their shape perfectly even in the strongest sea gales. The hairstyles of the Northerners were often true engineering masterpieces, consisting of dozens of tight knots and intricate weaves. Today, to create such impressive volume and long-lasting hold, fashionistas use tons of sticky hairspray and strong hold gel. For the Vikings, however, all it took to achieve an excellent, long-lasting result was simply not to rinse out their powerful caustic soap completely. Educated English and Frankish authors describe these complex hairstyles of the daring sea raiders with great astonishment in their detailed chronicles. They often noted that the dangerous Danish warriors wore long, thick bangs and shaved the backs of their heads very short. This was not merely a stylish tribute to the ever-changing local fashion, but also a highly practical solution for constantly wearing a heavy iron helmet. A man's long, thick beard was always very neatly braided into several tight plaits so as not to hinder him in close-quarters combat. No sensible, experienced warrior wanted a cunning enemy to suddenly grab him by his luxuriant, unbound beard in the heat of a bloody battle. Of course, such an extremely aggressive daily hygiene routine inevitably had very unpleasant negative consequences for the health of the scalp and face. The constant, deep degreasing of the epidermis quickly led to severe dryness and very painful cracks, especially in the freezing winter weather. Therefore, after harsh alkaline washing, they always had to use natural emollients and nourishing moisturizers liberally. They often used various warm vegetable oils or well-purified animal fats without the addition of caustic, burning ash. It was a primitive but wonderfully effective historical counterpart to modern, nourishing body cream used after a hot shower. The ingenuity of Northerners in matters of personal care simply boggles the imagination of modern people who are spoiled by comfort. They created a unique, self-sufficient system of personal hygiene, skillfully using only what the harsh northern nature provided them. Their homemade soap was a truly powerful weapon against deadly diseases and the ubiquitous biting parasites. And their elaborate, distinctive hairstyles served as an important symbol of high social status and undeniable military valor. They didn't merely survive in the filth of the Middle Ages, they actively fought against it. And they triumphed in this war with no less success than on the actual battlefields. If you ask anyone to name the most iconic Viking artifact, they'll say an axe. Perhaps someone more knowledgeable might mention a round shield or a long sword, but real archaeologists know that the most common find at excavation sites is a comb. Whether made of wood, bone, or deer antler, they are found in absolutely every grave. From a poor farmer to a great konung, everyone took their comb with them to the afterlife. Scientists find them by the thousands during excavations of ancient settlements and burial sites. Crafting a proper comb was a complex and highly prized craft in Scandinavia. It wasn't a single piece of plastic stamped out in a factory in a matter of seconds. The master bone carver assembled the comb from several parts, like a true medieval engineer. This process required incredible precision and immense patience. First, sturdy bone plates were prepared to serve as the foundation for the future comb. Then, using tiny saws, the craftsman carefully cut the teeth. He sawed thin teeth from sturdy reindeer antler and fastened them with bronze rivets. Reindeer antler was considered the finest and most reliable material. It possessed the perfect balance of hardness and natural elasticity. This composite construction made the comb incredibly strong and flexible at the same time. Even under heavy pressure, the tool would spring back rather than snap in half. This assembly technique was centuries ahead of its time. Why did they need such complex engineering just to comb their hair? The answer once again lies in the harsh reality of northern hygiene and the fight against parasites. In the Middle Ages, lice and fleas were a real scourge for anyone. They carried dangerous diseases and caused constant discomfort. The teeth of a high-quality comb were spaced so closely together that a louse could not slip through. The dense row of teeth acted as a perfect filter against any insects. The Vikings literally combed dust, dirt, and unwanted inhabitants out of their beards. It was a daily, painstaking task that required a reliable, high-quality tool. Thick hair quickly accumulated debris after long sea voyages or hard labor. Mighty warriors spent long hours on the monotonous task of cleaning their hair. A poor quality comb would have broken on a thick beard stiffened by sea salt on the very first day. Therefore, it was extremely unwise to skimp on such an important household item. The design of these hygiene items was a true work of art for its time. Artisans adorned the backs of the combs with intricate geometric patterns and runic inscriptions. Often, they carved images of animals intertwining in the famous animal style. One might encounter motifs of dragons, bears, or mythical sea serpents. The runes often contained the owner's name or a spell for good luck in battle. Such a detailed pattern signified the owner's high status. Wearing a beautiful comb on one's belt was as prestigious as wearing an expensive watch today. It was a striking status symbol, indicating that a person took care of their appearance and had money. Combs were often carried in special protective cases to prevent the teeth from breaking during a campaign. These cases were also made of bone and decorated with incredible attention to detail. The protective case was attached to the comb itself with a sturdy leather cord. A warrior might sleep on damp ground, but his hair comb remained completely safe. Losing one's personal comb was considered a bad omen and a great disgrace for a man. It would be like showing up to important negotiations today in a dirty, wrinkled shirt. It is important to note that combing was not only a practical procedure, but also a social ritual.
It's all right now.
Often, wives or concubines would comb their men's hair in the evenings by the fire. This was an act of trust and a gesture of care in their harsh, brutal society. Touching someone's hair was considered a sign of deep affection. The sagas mention how women vowed not to comb their hair until they had avenged their husbands. Neglecting personal hygiene was used as a demonstration of extreme grief and a sacred vow. A person would deliberately deprive themselves of their usual comforts for the sake of a greater cause. In addition to combs, a Viking standard hygiene kit included several other interesting items. They wore small metal tweezers around their necks to remove splinters and excess hair. This helped prevent infected wounds after working with wood. A special ear spoon for cleaning wax from the ear canals often hung nearby. Yes, these bloodthirsty killers meticulously cleaned their ears with a special silver tool. My ears start to itch just thinking about how meticulous they were about this. A modern cotton swab looks pitiful compared to their silver ear spoons. These spoons were made of precious metals and bronze. They served their owners for decades and were carefully passed down through the generations. During excavations of the trading town of Burka, archaeologists found hundreds of such hygiene kits. It's clear that the production of beauty items had become a large-scale commercial enterprise. There were entire workshops dedicated exclusively to meeting this demand. Birka's artisans supplied these goods to merchants throughout Northern Europe. Bone carvers earned excellent money by selling their wares to warriors setting out on raids. Beauty demanded sacrifices, but more often than not, it demanded a good supply of silver coins. Interestingly, a love of combing can even be traced in their mythology. According to legends, when the god Vali was born, he neither washed his hands nor combed his hair. He vowed to remain uncombed until he avenged the death of the light god Balder. Once again, we see this motif, the rejection of the comb as a symbol of an abnormal, crisis-ridden state. A normal Scandinavian was simply obligated to keep his hair in perfect order. One's outward appearance reflected inner harmony and readiness for great deeds. So the next time you watch a TV series set in the Viking Age, pay attention to their hair. If it looks like a tangled crow's nest, feel free to turn off that historical fiction. A true northerner would rather grab a sword than go out in public with a hairstyle like that. Their harsh world demanded order in everything, from the sharpening of weapons to the grooming of their hair. Self-respect began with the basic cleanliness of one's own body, and their magnificent composite combs are the best tangible proof of that. We've talked a lot about how clean the Vikings seemed compared to the filthy conditions of Europe, but there is one famous historical document that turns this picture upside down. In the 10th century, the Arab diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan encountered Swedish Vikings on the Volga River. He was on a long diplomatic mission to the king of the Volga Bulgars. What he saw and recorded shocked the entire enlightened Islamic world of that time, and his travel notes give us a completely different perspective on northern hygiene. Ibn Fadlan was a representative of a highly developed culture where the protocols for ritual ablution were codified in religion. For Muslims, physical purity was inextricably linked to spiritual purity. Arabs washed themselves with clean running water several times a day before prayers. Their customs strictly forbade the use of stagnant or previously used water. When the diplomat witnessed the morning routines of the northern merchants, he experienced a profound culture shock. He called them the filthiest of Allah's creations, despite their magnificent physiques. Sounds strange, doesn't it? After all, we've just proven that the Vikings washed constantly and took good care of themselves. The secret lies in the details of the washing ritual itself, as observed by the Arab envoy. Every morning, a slave girl would bring a large wooden tub of water to her master. The water was often scooped directly from a cold river at dawn. The Viking would wash his hands and face in it, comb his hair, and then blow his nose and spit right into that same water. For the pampered southern guest, this sight alone was a real ordeal. But the real nightmare for the Arab diplomat was just beginning. Ibn Fadlan watched in horror as the tub was not emptied onto the ground afterward. The slave girl obediently passed the very same tub to the next warrior sitting nearby, and the next man repeated the entire process in the very same soapy, dirty water. Thus, a single basin made its way around the entire large trading caravan in a circle. For an Arab accustomed to clean jugs and running water, this was an indescribable abomination. He could not understand how people of such striking appearance could behave like animals. The Eastern envoy's disgust is entirely understandable from the perspective of modern medicine. But let's look at this situation through the eyes of the Scandinavian merchants themselves. They were on a long trading expedition where heating a bucket of water was a difficult task. Conserving hot water under such conditions was an entirely logical decision for them. Gathering fuel and heating fresh batches of water for each warrior took too much time. Moreover, this shared tub held deep ritual and social significance for their unit. Sharing bodily fluids symbolized complete brotherhood and trust within the military unit. If you're afraid to spit into the same water as your comrade, how can you trust him to have your back in battle? Modern psychologists call this extreme team building in isolated groups. The Vikings simply called it a typical Tuesday morning on the Volga River. Despite the shock of the ritual, Ibn Fadlan could not help but note their physical perfection. He wrote that he had never seen people with more perfect bodies. The diplomat compared their tall stature to slender palm trees. The Arab author was also struck by their light hair and the abundance of unusual patterns on their skin. He mentioned that they always carried clean combs with them and constantly combed their hair. The Scandinavians carefully groomed their beards, even far from their native shores. The Arab intellectual found himself caught in a trap of cognitive dissonance as he observed these people. They were incredibly well groomed on the outside, but the methods they used to achieve this grooming made him feel nauseous. This is a perfect example of how different cultures evaluate the concept of cleanliness. For some, cleanliness lies in strict rules regarding the use of the proper water. For others, only the final aesthetic result on the head and face matters. The East and the North clashed in the form of these completely different people. It is important to understand that Ibn Fadlan's accounts describe the harsh, nomadic lifestyle of mercenary merchants. These people sailed for months in narrow ships through dangerous foreign lands. Back in their homes in Scandinavia, they would hardly have practiced passing dirty water around in a circle. There, they had saunas, hot stones, and unlimited access to clean streams. The Scandinavians even had a special sauna day at the end of each week. But thousands of kilometers from home, the rules of survival and hygiene inevitably changed. Washing with dirty, warm water was still better than not washing at all for weeks on end. This diplomat's notes are invaluable because they debunk both black and white myths. They prove that the Vikings were obsessive about their appearance even in the wild steppes. At the same time, they show that their standards differed radically from modern ones. For them, washing was a functional act, devoid of our modern squeamishness. The result was what mattered: clean hair, a combed beard, and no parasites on the skin. Centuries later, this paradox still astonishes historians reading old manuscripts. How could the same nation have earned the reputation of being the cleanest people in England and the dirtiest in the East? The answer is simple. Everything is relative to local standards of living. To a lice-ridden English peasant, a Viking with a comb was a messenger of cleanliness from the future. To a refined Arab nobleman, that same Viking seemed like a Phaja from a cave. And both of these historical assessments are, in their own way, absolutely true. This story teaches us not to judge the past by modern standards of comfort. The Scandinavians did the best they could given their technology and harsh living conditions. Their hygiene was brutal, practical, and sometimes shocking to the unprepared observer. But it was precisely this harsh practicality that helped them survive in the icy seas. It allowed them to cross the oceans and leave their indelible mark on history. And the shocked Ibn Fadlan simply became their best free PR manager in the East. So far, we've discussed how the Vikings tried to get rid of dirt and odors, but there's one detail of their life on the road that shatters the image of the warrior who exudes cleanliness. When the Drakkar set out onto the open, icy sea, the rules of the game changed drastically. At that moment, soap and combs were stowed deep inside the chests, and fat took center stage. And believe me, the smell of this substance was a far cry from the fragrances of Parisian perfumery. The North Atlantic is not the warm Mediterranean Sea with its light, pleasant breeze. It is a place where icy waves, biting winds, and salty spray can kill a man in a matter of hours. The skin on their hands and faces would crack until it bled from constant exposure to salt and frost. To survive, Northerners had to resort to radical methods to protect their bodies. They thickly coated exposed areas of skin with seal or goose fat before heading out to sea. This created a waterproof barrier that retained heat and prevented the skin from cracking. Modern extreme swimmers use a special ointment to cross cold straits. The Vikings invented this biological wetsuit more than 1,000 years ago. There was only one problem. Over time, the animal fat would go rancid and stink horribly. Imagine a crew of 40 men covered in old seal blubber sailing for a week in the same boat. The stench must have been so thick you could have cut through it with their famous axes. This layer of fat was not washed off until the ship reached a safe harbor. Any attempt to wash up on the open sea would have led to instant hypothermia and death. Therefore, during sea voyages, hygiene was deliberately put on hold for the sake of survival. The smelly, dirty fat became their best armor against their main enemy, ruthless nature. Roman legionnaires wore steel armor, while the Vikings wore armor made of fat and wool. And for their purposes, this unpleasant attire was far better suited than heavy metal. Interestingly, they impregnated not only their skin, but also their clothing with fat. Their famous woolen cloaks were treated with sheep fat, lanolin, to make them completely waterproof. Water simply rolled off such a cloak, leaving the person inside dry and warm. Today, we pay a fortune for jackets with Gore-Tex membranes for hiking in the mountains. The Scandinavians achieved the same effect simply by not washing their wool until it squeaked. Yes, it smelled of sheep and the sea, but it saved them from deadly pneumonia. As soon as the Drakkar pulled up to shore, an instant transformation took place. The smelly savages leaped ashore, lit fires, and began their logardagr. They washed away the protective layer of grease with alkaline soap, combed their hair, and put on clean linen. In a couple of hours, the sea vagabonds turned into the very dandies who so infuriated the English monks. It was an incredible contrast that cannot be captured in a single film frame. It is precisely this duality that makes their culture so unique and difficult to understand. They could be incredibly dirty when the tactical conditions of their mission demanded it, but they would become obsessively clean as soon as the first physical opportunity arose. There was no room for squeamishness in their society, but there was immense respect for order. They understood that there is a time for everything, a time to smear themselves with fat, and a time to clean their ears with silver. Modern viewers often fail to recognize this adaptability of ancient people to their circumstances. We want historical figures to be either perpetually clean knights or perpetually filthy barbarians. But the reality of the Viking Age was a constant compromise between aesthetics and survival in the cold. Their hygiene practices were as flexible as their ships, bending with the ocean waves. And this flexibility was the main strength of the northern civilization of that time. Keep this in mind the next time you apply moisturizer to your face on a cold winter day. Your skincare products smell pleasantly of lavender and are quickly absorbed into your skin without a trace. 1,000 years ago, a rugged warrior with a chunk of seal blubber would have stood in your place. Your goals are exactly the same. It's just that technology has advanced a bit since then. And to be honest, modern cream would hardly have saved you during a storm in the Atlantic. Fat, lye, ash, and sea salt. These were the true cosmetics of the age of great expeditions. It was brutal chemistry that worked flawlessly under the harshest conditions on the planet. And every time a Viking washed off this mixture, he regained his human, civilized appearance. This process of rebirth, from a beast fighting for survival to a pure warrior, was repeated year after year. This is exactly how the character of the people whose names are still remembered throughout Europe was forged. We've come a long way from the myths of modern pop culture to the harsh reality of the 8th century. You've seen that real Vikings were a world away from the image of unwashed, growling savages. They developed a hygiene system that was centuries ahead of the habits of their southern and western neighbors. Their weekly baths saved their lives just as reliably as their sturdy wooden shields. In a world where disease and unsanitary conditions reigned, they prioritized bodily cleanliness. Their beauty tools command respect even from modern engineers and designers. Composite combs made of deer antler prove that they value delicate, painstaking handiwork. Nail files, tweezers, and silver spoons shatter the stereotype of people who know only how to swing a sword. These raiders wanted to look their best, not only on Earth, but also in the presence of their gods. For them, beauty was not a sign of weakness, but a marker of high status and inner discipline. Yes, their methods may seem radical, crude, and sometimes repulsive to us today. Bathing as a crowd in a single tub or bleaching hair with caustic alkaline ash would shock a modern person. But these methods worked flawlessly in the harsh environments where they had to live. They eliminated parasites, prevented infections, and forged strong social bonds within their groups. Modern science merely confirms the logic they arrived at intuitively through practice. The next time you tune in to yet another Hollywood fairy tale about Scandinavia, take a closer look. If the characters on screen are covered in picturesque mud, know this: you're being blatantly deceived for the sake of a pretty picture. The real Ragnar Lothbrok would surely have asked for hot water and a good bone comb. And then, he'd set off to charm English ladies with his clean linen undergarments and the scent of soap. After all, history often turns out to be far more interesting, clever, and paradoxical than any director's fantasy. This video is just a small attempt to restore historical justice to a great culture. We've forgotten that behind every great conquest lies not only weapons, but also the mundane realities of daily life. The nations that survive and triumph are those that know how to adapt, learn, and take care of themselves. The Vikings knew how to do this better than most, and their legacy is direct proof of that. They left their mark not only with their swords, but also with their remarkable attitude toward life. Think about this when you take a shower on Saturday night after a hard week at work. Without even realizing it, you're continuing the ancient tradition of that very day of hot water. You're washing away stress and fatigue and preparing for the new challenges of the next difficult week. 1,000 years ago, somewhere on the shores of Norway, people were doing exactly the same thing. The connection between the past and present is much stronger than we think. It's embedded in our simplest habits. We often underestimate our ancestors, thinking they were less intelligent simply because they didn't have electricity. But their solutions to problems were ingenious in their simplicity and astonishing effectiveness. They turned animal fat into armor and wood ash into the best remedy for illness. By studying their way of life, we learn to understand how the human mind overcomes any obstacle. This inspires genuine admiration for their incredible willpower and boundless zest for life. Now you know the truth hidden behind the myths, legends, and cheap movie tricks. You know why English monks wrote their angry complaints with hands trembling with indignation, and why the Arab ambassador couldn't take his eyes off these pure yet intimidating northerners. This truth makes the Viking Age even more majestic, vivid, and truly human. They were fierce warriors, but they were warriors who respected themselves and their bodies. If you enjoyed this in-depth analysis of historical facts, stay tuned to our channel. Many more amazing discoveries about the technologies and secrets of the ancient world await us. We'll continue to shatter stereotypes and show the past as it truly was, unvarnished, uncensored, and grounded in archaeology and common sense. Because real history always turns out to be cooler than any made-up thrilling fairy tale. Thank you for watching this video all the way through and immersing yourselves in this harsh era alongside me. Don't forget to check your combs, and always remember the importance of Saturday. May your personal hygiene always remain your secret weapon against life's challenges. See you in future episodes, where history will come to life again in the finest detail. Keep your axe sharp and your beard perfectly combed and clean at all times.